What is the Minecraft Tree Spirit Challenge? That is a good question, and it is the purpose of this video, because after the embarrassing fail of our hardcore world after 5 episodes, we're going to be starting a new series called the Tree Spirit Challenge. And while a lot of people I'm sure will know what the challenge is, there are going to be a few that don't. And so this video is going to be for those of you who don't know the rules, and for maybe some of you who just want to refresh it or want to know the rules I'm playing with. Before I go on, I am going to say that I did actually do this challenge once before, the Tree Spirit Challenge, but due to some technical issues, basically I deleted the footage of the old Tree Spirit Challenge, and at the time I was still unsure if I wanted to do anything on YouTube, so I wasn't really that involved in it. This time it's going to be different. I am going to try and go for as long as possible. So this video is going to be me trying to cover all the rules within the Tree Spirit Challenge, and if I miss anything, feel free to ask in the comments or point it out in the comments. To be honest, you could probably do a quick Google search and find the info you need, but I'm hoping you don't have to. Also, quick disclaimer, this is a challenge that will test your patience and stamina. If you hate wood chopping, I wouldn't advise this, because you're going to have to do tons of the stuff. Previous attempts at this challenge have left my wrists sore from the amount of trees I've had to chop down. But if you're looking for a real challenge beyond just a regular hardcore, then I would highly recommend this as a serious contender. But again, it's not for everyone. First things first, you want to find a tree. It can be any tree you want. It can be birch, oak, jungle, spruce, whatever. You know, as long as it is a tree. Once you've chosen your tree, that is it. That is your tree, okay? Advice on what tree to chop down. Personally, I prefer spruce or jungle because of the giant versions, but we can get into that later. So when you find your tree, what you want to do is you leave the very bottom log. You chop down the rest and you leave the bottom log. This bottom log becomes your heart log. The heart log is basically the center of what will become your heart tree, and if the heart log is destroyed by any means, I don't know, fire, an exploding creeper, TNT, or you accidentally chop it into pieces, whatever it is, if that is destroyed, the challenge is over. You failed. So you basically want to protect this at all costs. It is your most valuable block within the game. Now the other logs from that tree can be used to extend this heart tree. Now some people like to refer to these as roots. I personally just call them heart tree logs. So heart tree logs for just any of the logs you mine from your trees, and a heart log is your center of the heart tree. The heart log is the one you don't want to destroy. You can only extend your heart tree through the heart tree logs, and any saplings gained from your first tree will grow into trees that will produce more logs. Now these logs will be classed as heart tree logs, and so you can use those logs to extend your heart tree. And of course the saplings from those trees can also be used to grow more trees, and those trees will be classed as having logs from the heart tree logs. Basically all of your trees must have a direct descendancy or ancestry from your first tree, and any of the future trees apart from your first tree, you know, any of the future trees you chop down, you do not have to leave the bottom log. Is only leave the bottom log of the first tree. You only have one heart log within the world. So going back to the saplings, basically as long as you can track a sapling's heritage back to your original first tree, you can use it. Now as for placing your heart tree logs, there are different rules. Some people like to play that once you've placed the log you can't move it, because you know roots are unmovable. But for me personally, I don't do that. It can be an inconvenience, and sometimes you can make misclicks. You know, I personally think it's fine to break the logs as long as it's not the heart log. So you can place, like, say a heart tree log and then move it later on or whenever, as long as it's just not the heart log. For me that's fine. I'm in that camp of thought. For any other trees of the same species, you cannot use their logs or saplings to grow your heart tree. So for example, if I started with an oak tree, I can't use the logs or the saplings of the nearby oak trees to grow my heart tree, because it's not a direct descendant of my first tree. You know, they're just other oak trees. So basically see them as competitors, right? They're also potential heart trees. That's the way I look at it. Now it doesn't mean you can't chop them down. You can still use their logs, you just can't use them to extend your heart tree. Personally, I wouldn't keep them as logs. I would do something like change them into planks or smelt them in a furnace to make charcoal. You want to make sure you don't confuse them with your heart logs, because if you find out that actually part of your heart tree is made with logs that are made from just normal regular trees, then you've basically failed the challenge and you'll have to start again. The saplings gained from these trees you'll either have to throw away or maybe you could compost. Okay, now when it comes to extending your heart tree, it should probably come as no surprise that the logs from other types of trees cannot be used to extend your heart tree, as we just said. You also can't use anything other than logs to extend your heart tree. You can't change your heart tree logs into planks to extend your heart tree, because that takes away part of the challenge. It becomes much easier. Though, I mean, if you really wanted to, you could. There's no one stopping you. If you're just playing it by yourself. For me, I'm not going to do that. That is not part of the challenge. And like I said, you do take some of the difficulty out of it. And I know I just said you can't use any other block to extend your heart tree other than heart tree logs, but actually you can use leaves. I just normally don't count leaves because of how fragile they are. I don't normally use them to extend the heart tree. I use them for decoration purposes, but you can use the leaves as well. Next is about log placement. Where can you place a heart tree log that it will be connected to the heart tree, and thus the heart tree grows in size? So as you can see on screen here, you have a log surrounded by adjacent glass blocks. The glass blocks represent all of the spaces you can place a log to connect it to another log. Not everyone agrees with this, however, so I'm going to explain further. Personally, I allow for diagonally placed blocks. I think they're fine to be able to grow your tree. As shown on the screen now with red stained glass, these diagonally blocks are, for me, allowed. It's not a legal move. If you was to place another log in one of these red stained glass squares, it would still be connected to the central log you see on screen. The next example, again, are more diagonal blocks, which I also think are a completely legal move. So you are connected to the central log. Some people don't think that. You know, some people prefer to play with the rules that one heart tree log can only be connected to another heart tree log if they are placed on the direct faces of each other, as shown here. So that limits the number of spaces you can use. And you know, if you prefer to do that, that's completely fine. It really just comes down to personal preference. For me, the reason I allow for diagonal blocks to be placed is because that's how roots are in the real world. They do move diagonally. They don't just move at perpendicular angles. It's just more of a natural design to them, personally, but you may disagree. For example, a line of logs placed as such, for me, would be fine. I consider all of these to be connected, but again, it's personal preference and not everyone would. That's something you have to decide for yourself. Okay, next is about where you as a player are allowed to walk. Again, to keep this simple, as long as you're either directly touching the heart tree or on a block that is directly connected to the heart tree, you're allowed to stand there. So I'm going to give some visual examples on the screen now. So this first one is just me walking on top and alongside this stretch of heart tree logs, which we're just going to pretend they're heart tree logs for the example. Because I'm directly touching them, it's fine. Alright, next example. I'm not directly touching the logs, as you can see. I'm walking on a layer of stained glass blocks. There's a block in between myself and the heart tree logs. However, these blocks are all directly connected to the heart tree logs, so it's fine to stand here, because from the previous examples about which blocks are connected to a heart tree block, it's fine. Remember, as long as you're standing on a heart tree block or touching a heart tree block or on a block that is directly connected to a heart tree log, is fine. If I was stood on another block on top of these blocks, that would not be allowed, because I would be stood on a block that is connected to another block that is directly connected to the heart tree. I have to be on a block that is at least itself directly touching a heart tree. If I'm not, that would be the maximum amount of distance you can get away from it. And our last example of connective blocks are the diagonally placed blocks that myself do consider to be connected to the heart tree. Now again, this is personal preference. If you think diagonally placed blocks are not allowed, then discount this, but for me, diagonally placed blocks are allowed, and so walking along this line of red stained glass is completely fine. You are still connected to the heart tree. It's still a completely legal measure. Now I will say that I am going to allow myself some leniency. Say for instance there is an item or block that drops a few blocks away from the heart tree. I'm going to allow myself to walk like a few blocks over to retrieve it, as long as I head straight back to the heart tree. You know, as long as I'm not actively exploring areas that are out of reach, then I have no problem. You know, just being away a few blocks to get something and heading back, I'm not going to beat myself up for it. If you want to play very strict tight rules where no, you have to always be directly touching the heart tree at all times, then you know, I completely respect that. That is your playthrough, go for it. Also, a question I've seen come up a lot is if jumping is fine. Yeah, that's a common question, and it is completely fine. Even on the blocks that are directly connected to the heart tree, jumping is fine. You don't penalise yourself for it. It's going to make your playthrough miserable. Okay, what about if you fall off the side of a heart tree into a space with no logs? You know, if it's a complete accident, then I would say just head directly back to your heart tree without doing anything else, and it's fine. I know some people would say that's the end of the challenge. Again, it just depends how strict you want to make it. I'm just trying to have some fun, so I'd probably allow for some forgiveness in this area if it's a complete accident. If you're actively using it as like a dive board into an area that is completely unconnected to your heart tree, then no, it's not allowed. Okay, so this is a bonus rule. Well, no, it's not even a rule, it's an allowance, and it's a one-time deal that you can replace your heart log for another type of block for easy identification. You can't replace it for like a stone block or something like obsidian where it's not breakable. It has to be something that is breakable still, or easily breakable. Some common choices choices are like sheep's wool or light emitted blocks such as a sea lantern, shroom light or glowstone. Or just putting a torch on top of the block is quite an easy way to identify it. Trust me, when you have a lot of logs in the area, it can be very easy to lose track of which one your heart log is. Okay, so this next one is considered a bonus rule, and it is for the use of an Elytra. There are mixed opinions surrounding the Elytra. For me, as I said before, I'm wanting to have some fun, and I would say using an Elytra is fine under some conditions. The first is you have to take off from an area of your heart tree, of course, and that you have to land on another area of your heart tree. They don't have to be the same point on the heart tree, and it can be on any directly connected block. As long as you take off and land back on your heart tree is fine. That means yes, exploration then could be done, because you could fly out to new areas, and as long as you return back to your heart tree to land on it, then again I don't see a problem. Personally, it is a bit risky, because if you land in a new area with no heart tree, or if your Elytra breaks and you get stranded there, then yeah, that's the challenge over. It's lost, at least in my eyes. Now swimming, on the other hand, I think is the same rules as on land. That's how I play, at least. You can only go where there are heart tree blocks, and I know it does seem like a bit of a double standard, so again, that's personal choice, but for some reason swimming across an area and then back to your heart tree seems more of an illegal move than using an Elytra. I don't know why, probably a fallacy of some sort. So again, it's personal preference. If you want to allow that, that's fine. I personally am not going to. And I think that sums up everything. I'm sure I've probably missed a couple of things, a couple of questions that will come up. If you do have any, leave them in the comments below, or just do a Google search. Alright, so that's everything. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video, which will be the first episode of this challenge.
Lord, let me get my cash right. I'm trying to fly, still tired from last night. Putting that work in to all of my earthlings. When them haters acting up, gotta give them that act right. Back up on the scene with some flame shit. Different